Sleepaway Camp is a 1983 release slasher directed by Robert Hiltzik.
The film opens with two siblings, a young boy and a young girl called Angela and Peter, and they're with their father at a lake doing a bit of boating, and they're just messing around on the water. There's some teenagers who are driving a boat and somebody's water skiing behind them. They're a little bit distracted, not paying attention to what else is going on in the lake, and unfortunately there's an accident. The father and one of the kids is killed. We then cut to several years later. Angela is living with her cousin and her aunt. Her cousin called Ricky, sort of similar age to her. Yeah, his mother is, shall we say, strange. Or, to be less kind, completely nuts. There's a scene where she's packing them off to summer camp, which is a sort of big thing in America. We don't really have that over here particularly, do we? Not to the extent they do. But yeah, it's a big deal over there. You know, lots of kids get packed off for a few weeks over the summer. Lucky parents. They do all sorts of activities, play sports and get up to lots of other things, I'm sure. The two kids go off to camp. Once they're there, people start dying in mysterious, grisly circumstances. So first of all, a pervy cook ends up with a massive pan of boiling water all over him. And yeah, it goes on from there, where people are dispatched, shall we say, in grisly manners. Angela herself is, obviously, she had this traumatic experience as a kid, so she doesn't really talk much. She doesn't really want to take part in many of the activities. Kind of wonder what she's even doing there, to be honest. The other kids there kind of start to get irritated by her unwillingness to talk to them and to get involved as well, She's obviously a little bit damaged by her experience as a kid. These murders keep happening. That the camp owner is becoming more and more distraught that his camp is suddenly going to have to be closed down because of all these people being murdered, and everyone's going to leave and no one's ever going to come back again. Doesn't really care that they've been killed. He's more worried about his profits. The film carries on in a sort of traditional slasher way.
You'd think, though, that they'd close that camp after the first death, I would have thought. Any of these films, you'd think they'd close the camp straight away after any of these deaths.
The health and safety experts would be in there straight away, wouldn't they?
Anyway, Sleepaway Camp, why are we doing this film? Well, it's Halloween, month of Halloween, so it's a horror film, slasher horror film, so we're doing it for that reason. We're also doing it because a couple of people on our channel have said at quite peculiar times we should cover this film. Usually on a film that's released the same year, you'll get a comment saying, do Sleepaway Camp. Okay, all right.
So we've finally given in and we're doing it.
Exactly. And Simon even went and bought the thing.
I did.
I can't say I've ever even heard of this one. I mean, I've heard of it, but I've never seen it before. I've seen most of the kind of slasher camp, summer camp films. I mean, like you say, it's an interesting one, the summer camp horror slasher. I mean, there's comedies as well. Obviously, Meatballs is a famous comedy version of the Sleepaway of the summer camp. But being from Britain, it's not something we really do in this country. Go to summer camps. The weather was never good enough for that anyway.
No. That's true.
When we don't really have those kind of we have reservoirs in this country. Where you can go out and take a canoe out and maybe cycle around it. We have scouts and girl guides and brownies, but I think I was never in any of those, so I guess they go off and do, things like that. But in America, I mean, I don't know if they still do it, to be honest, but, back in the 80s, it was a big thing, I think.
Well, films certainly made it look like it was a big thing. Maybe it wasn't.
Well, that's true. But then there are a few of these films, and as there are comedy films as well, so they must be basing it on some kind of reality.
Well, yeah.
And I think the director of this film, Robert Hiltzik, he kind of based it on his experiences as a young man going to camps, and maybe it was something that was maybe done more earlier, 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe. So that's kind of the reason we're doing this. But I've seen, obviously the big one is Friday the 13th. Well, I suppose the original, you've got films like Black Christmas and Halloween that started off the slasher genre. You could even go back to Psycho and films like that. But then, of course, Friday the 13th comes along and does the kind of the summer camp idea. And there are others like The Burning and Madman, and I think is it April Fool's Day, which is a kind of send-up of that genre.
Yeah.
I always liked The Burning. I was a big fan of The Burning. Friday the 13th is a great film as well, and some of its sequels. But I always liked The Burning. I thought The Burning was vicious and had some really good stuff in it.
I have it on my shelf, but I still not got around to watching it.
Oh, you should watch it. It's
watch
a
it.
really it's kind of a standout for me anyway. I think it's a standout slasher, one of the slasher genre films. This one, however, was slightly different. This one was quite peculiar, quite odd, but I enjoyed it. Most of the time, I don't even know where to begin with it. I mean, it's a slasher film, kind of. There's deaths in there. Not everyone dies from the attacks though, which is quite unusual.
Well, no, I suppose I mentioned the cook, but he doesn't. Well, we never hear what happens to him, but he's not dead when they cart him off in the ambulance. So presumably he survives, just horribly burned.
But they're also, I mean, they're quite vicious. They're quite, well, I think what I liked about the films, maybe the positives from the films is that I found it very creative. There were lots of creative deaths in this. It's not just like being, axed or slashed or anything like that. It's got some quite creative death scenes. And also, unusually, you don't really see the actual murder take place. You do in some occasions, but what you actually see is the aftermath. There's lots of faces you see after they've been murdered. And that's quite grisly. There's a scene where a man is drowned. I mean, in itself, that's not maybe as violent as being stabbed or axed to death or something like that. He's drowned, but then you see the aftermath, and his face is, he's dead, and there's like a snake crawling out of his mouth, which is, it's a grim scene. And I think that for me is what really stood out for me in this film. I mean, it's a bit all over the place at times, and the acting is a bit kind of, I mean, there's not really anyone in it. Apart from a couple of names, there's not really anyone in there that's well known.
No.
To this day, no one, unlike Friday the 13th, for instance, has Kevin Bacon in, who goes off to be this big star. This one didn't really. None of the kids really went on to have big acting careers, and so the acting's a little bit. I mean, it's all fine. It's quite naturalistic.
I mean, that's what I would say. What I would say about it is obviously in a lot of these films about summer camps, the actors playing, sort of young teens are, quite likely in their 20s or late teens. So they're playing a lot younger than their actual ages. But the actors in this film, a lot of them are playing their ages. So obviously they are slightly more inexperienced. But it does sort of add to the authenticity of it. And the camp, it does, it does look and feel like a real summer camp. You see them doing activities and sports and things. There's even quite a long scene where they're playing baseball, and you think, is something horrifying going to happen in a second? Is someone going to get a baseball in the eye or something? But no, they just play the game, have a bit of an argument, and then that's it. But it goes on for quite a long time. So it's a bit of a random scene in there, but again, it just shows a bit of camp life that you often don't really see. Even
at the beginning, I mean, when the film introduces that, when the credits come up at the beginning, you see footage of summer camps. So you see sports fields and lakes, but you hear there's no one there. They're empty, but you hear the children playing at these places, which gives it a kind of, you got that kind of memories. And I mean, like I said, if the director based it on his childhood at these camps, maybe there's a kind of a natural feel to the film, and it's a kind of personal film. And I found the film actually, although it's a slasher film, so it's over the top, and this one in particular is quite over the top, and the acting's a bit some of the times, but to me it felt quite sincere. Do you know what I mean? It felt believable. It felt like the director was, he had a point to what he was doing. He had a reason for making this film. And I think actually, and I will say, and we certainly don't do spoilers on this channel, but if you know this film, you'll know that it has quite a twisty ending. And I think that was kind of what was odd about it. It feels very sincere at times, and it's quite nicely shot, and he clearly knew what he wanted to do. But then the ending doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the film. There are moments here and there. There's a couple of moments in the film that kind of link itself to the end, but there's a lot that I felt was missing in there that doesn't really lead up to this very kind of almost distressing, shocking ending scene. But there's certainly things in there that that are really nice to watch. And yeah, I mean, it's quite a peculiar film, I would say.
Just going back to the ending, you know, if you are familiar with it, it kind of raises questions about other things in the film that you think, well, okay, so if that's what was going on, what about this, and what about what this character did, and why? Like we said, it's a strange one. But not completely without merit. It wasn't, obviously we've been asked to do it several times, and it does obviously have its following, a bit of a cult following, and I can kind of see why. Obviously, it is early on in the slasher genre, and it does have its own sort of unique take on the slasher pick. So it's not without its redeeming features, but it's not. I wasn't completely blown away by it, shall we say?
No, I totally agree. I mean, like I said, I am a fan of. I mean, it's weird actually, because when it comes to horror, I'm not really a fan of the slasher genre. I mean, I like Halloween; it's a great film, but I'm not a big slasher film fan. As we've said on this channel before, I prefer psychological horror. I prefer kind of those descents into madness, those kind of strange. I am a big fan of Nightmare on Elm Street, and that's kind of a slasher film, but it's a more fantastical horror film. It has very surreal elements. That's what I like in horror. I'm not really a fan of the kind of slasher, that kind of almost home invasion type scenario. I find that maybe it's too realistic, it's too vicious at times. But I have watched many of those films, and some of them are really good, and they are, they are, at the end of the day, they are the kind of, what is it, like the urban chillers, the urban mystery stories, like the person banging on the roof of the car with someone's head. It's that kind of urban legends. That's what it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, but I think I think they have interesting ideas in these films, and this one had interesting stuff in there. But it didn't blow me away. I mean, that whole thing at the beginning with her aunt. You have this very odd moment with this kind of very over-the-top acting, which I have to say personally reminded me of... do you remember Rimmer in Red Dwarf? Was it Quarantine, where he becomes with Mr. Flibble? It was her, wasn't it?
I hadn't thought of that, but yes, you're absolutely right.
That's what it reminded me of, or maybe even like the Rocky Horror Picture Show or something like that.
Yeah.
It was a very kind of over-the-top. I mean, not even just. There are people. I've had friends who have had parents who are slightly over the top. Not that this was completely over the top. OTT over the top. John Waters territory maybe over the top. But then the rest of the film, there's nothing like that in the rest of the film. And
until you get to the end.
Well, but even that's not. The beginning of this is kind of comic book oddity. The end of the film is yes, it's over the top, but they don't really have a direct connection. I mean, I guess they do. There is a connection in there, obviously, but it isn't fleshed out in the dialogue.
No, this is the thing. At the start, and for the majority of the film, it makes absolutely no sense why it's been played that way. Yeah, it's just completely out of the. You're 5 minutes into the film, and you've got this weird woman speaking in a weird way, being very weird, and you're like, what? I thought I was watching a horror film. What the hell is going on?
Yeah.
It was an odd choice, shall we say.
But I think also, because like you said, it does have a following, this film. It's got a big cult following. But like I said last week when we did Cemetery Man, I think cult movies become, the films that become cult movies are often quite mysterious films. There are things in there that don't make a lot of sense. I mean, one of my favourite films is Repo Man, which itself has become a cult classic. And there are certainly things in there that you, if you really think about, you're like, what is going on there? I mean, it doesn't always make a lot of sense, and the characters are odd, and maybe the acting styles are a bit, different types of acting styles in there. And I think that's what makes a good cult film, and I can totally understand why this is a cult film. It's got some stuff in there that is really enjoyable, and I would watch this again. Yeah, thank you for, suggesting we watch it, because I didn't enjoy it, but I didn't hate it, and there's some interesting things in there. And I have to say, and it is nearer the end, but what the hell, there's a scene in it where a guy gets an arrow through his throat. I'm not quite sure how they did it, because it was very effective.
I tell you what, I had to rewind that about 3 times.
Yeah, same.
And you could just see there was wire.
Yeah, but it goes in and out the back.
I know, but I think the bit at the back must flipped up or something. It was really well done.
It was absolutely so well done.
But the bit at the front comes in on a wire. He's got a wire going
Okay.
into his neck, and it goes. Psh, but the back, don't know, but it must have just flicked up at the same time or something.
Yeah.
But it was really, it was really effective. I was like, how the hell did they do that?
And I think that's what I liked about it. The effects of some of the, well, like I said, you kind of see the aftermath. There's some times that are quite gruesome, and in fact, there's one killing in there where you don't see it, and apparently it was cut because it was so gruesome. So I'd be quite interested. I don't know if that's on the disc. Anyway, let's talk about the disc because you, like you said, you bought it.
I bought it. Yeah, I mean, it was released by Scream Factory a few years ago. There's no Blu-ray in the UK. It was out on DVD some years ago, but that seems to be quite hard to get hold of as well. Doesn't seem to be well, certainly not streaming on Amazon anyway. It's not one that's ever really shown on TV, so it was quite tough to get. And this Blu-ray seemed to be starting to get hard to pick up, so I grabbed it quick. Whether it's going out of print, don't know. I mean, obviously it was released quite a few years ago, so maybe Scream Factory don't have the rights anymore, so once it's out of stock, that's it. There won't be any more. But yeah, I mean, it had a new 2K scan. It looks. Obviously it's a low budget film, according to Wikipedia, $350,000. So yeah, pretty small. But yeah, it looks really nice, and it's got commentary and behind the scenes interviews and stuff like that. Watching the interviews, the cast, have a lot of affection for it. They all made great friends, and obviously they were quite young. It was like being at camp for them, and obviously, and some of them said, I'd been to camp, and it felt, the way they were filming, it felt like they were actually filming a real camp. So again, like we said, it's from that perspective, it's quite authentic, just with added murders. So yeah, I mean, if you are a fan of the film, then this is the version to go for. Obviously, it's because it's from the US and its Scream Factory is locked to Region A. So if you're in the UK, you'll need a Region A player. It does have the DVD in there as well. It was strange. Wasn't quite what I was expecting, shall we say?
I mean, I'd say, I'd be quite interested. Obviously, we have, most of our followers on this channel are either American or British. I'd be quite interested to hear from British film fans if they do. You know this film? Is it one? Because I mean, clearly there's a lot of British horror cult movie fans out there who, of course, will know this film. There are some films that don't reach this market as much as they do in America, and possibly that's because, like I said, the sleepaway, the summer camp idea is not something that really resonates with us over here so much. We need a slasher film at a Scout meeting.
And if you are in the US and you did spend many happy summers or miserable summers at camp, then let us know. Is this film an accurate representation? Obviously, murders aside, is the rest of it, pretty accurate? And do they still go on? Does people still go to summer camp? Don't know. Let us know. I think they probably do.
I think they might do. Yeah, I was actually reading a comment on Reddit because there have been adverts. You can often see adverts in this country for trips to America to become a camp supervisor or a counselor. So I think they still do them. And I was reading a comment on Reddit about a guy who'd gone over to do one, and while he was there, the camp was locked down because someone had escaped from prison nearby, and was found like camping near the lake near like a mile from where they were. So
basically the plot of a horror movie.
Basically the plot of a horror slasher film. Almost.
There's an escape maniac.
Exactly. Amazing.
Brilliant. Shit writes itself.
So that was Sleepaway Camp, and as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button over there, and don't forget to push that bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over here. Come and find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and join us next week for another video.